When lives are at stake, far from help, any of us might be called upon to do something we've never done before. I'm William Shatner. Tonight, true stories of courage and ingenuity on Rescue 911. We begin at a small airport outside St. Petersburg, Florida in September of 1984. 67-year-old Richard Yadwin was about to fly his wife Elaine and a friend the 200 miles back home to Fort Lauderdale. Shortly before takeoff in the single-engine plane, Richard called his friend and flight instructor, Ken Winters.
He told me he was having some difficulty with the engine. He had taxied out for takeoff. The engine was backfiring a little bit.
Seatbelt okay, Nancy? Yeah, I'm all buckled in, thanks.
So he spent an extra night there. And the next morning, he had his airplane checked out by a mechanic. Since I did not hear from him, I assumed that he was on his way back to Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport.
Richard had submitted a flight plan with Miami Center. Controller Doris Wilson was tracking his plane.
I'd been monitoring all the aircraft on my scope, doing the visual scanning, and I noticed that this aircraft was 600 feet above their assigned altitude.
November 30 Golf, mostly indicate 5,400.
I read back the assigned altitude to the aircraft.
And Cherokee 8330 Golf, Miami Center.
I did not get a response. I wasn't really overly concerned at that time because the pilot could have been just off frequency for a short while. It was approximately 2 to 3 minutes later that I heard the faint call coming over the radio.
30 Golf, we're having a big problem. I think my husband just had a stroke. 8330 Golf, are you flying the plane? Are you a pilot?
6,000 feet above ground, without a pilot.
Pilot's had a heart attack. His wife is flying the airplane and she doesn't know how to fly. Okay.
Senior Controller Steve Calbaugh was put in charge of the situation.
30 Golf, are you capable of flying it in? No, I am not. I've never flown before.
I've had other emergencies, but I had never seen a situation in which the pilot had become unable to fly the aircraft and there was no one else on board that could fly. The possibility that she could die was very real.
You're going to have to take the traffic down and out of the scope. I'll have to take the emergency for you.
Okay, I'll move over here.
8330 Golf, you want to say the aircraft is on autopilot right now? Yes, it is on autopilot. 30 Golf, roger. Just try to calm down and relax. Leave the aircraft on autopilot for the present time.
The aircraft was actually in level flight, and she was in no immediate danger of the airplane falling out of the sky. But she has to get that airplane on the ground if her husband's going to live. And I haven't flown an airplane in my life. Give me Wayne Rosshaven.
Okay. He's Cherokee instructor.
Steve knew that his friend and fellow controller Wayne Rosshaven was an instructor very familiar with the plane that Elaine was in.
Wayne would be able to visualize that cockpit in his mind and explain to her exactly where everything was. But they had to find him.
30 Golf, are you able to read the gauges and tell us how much fuel you have on board? All right, so we're on the left tank and that says 0. The right tank is almost 10.
The tank was about out of gas. I turned around and said, "She's out of fuel, get me a Cherokee pilot now." And they proceeded to try to find anyone that would know how to make that fuel changeover.
The supervisor walked down an aisleway asking if anybody knew how to fly a Cherokee.
It was the first time trainee Jim Zeiler had been directly responsible for a plane.
I've been a flight instructor and trained probably in the neighborhood of 100 hours in that particular type of aircraft, so I was familiar with the fuel system.
Left tank's on 0. That's the one she's on.
Okay, 30 Golf, you see the red mixture control knob, the far right knob and the 3 protruding knobs out of the panel, control knob? Put that up to Rich. Yes, ma'am, put that to Rich, that is correct. Okay, it's on Rich. Okay, next, do you see a fuel pump switch, a fuel pump pump switch on the instrument panel. Do not activate it, but just locate it. Oh, hurry up. It's a fuel. Okay, now switch the tank now. Immediately switch the tank to the right tank, right now.
She, in fact, did run out of fuel, and her engine started to sputter on her.
You really drop down to the pits because there's nothing we can do about that if that engine doesn't catch while it's windmilling.
Don't worry about the fuel pump. Switch the tank. 30, go with the copy. Lever is on the far left side of the cockpit, down around your lower left side of the cockpit. White knob.
Someone had finally managed to locate controller Wayne Rosshaven.
I want to put on the right tank. Yeah, I'm on the right tank, I guess now. Okay, is your engine running smoothly? I didn't get that. Is your engine running smoothly? Yes, it's running smoothly now.
It's running smoothly now. It's okay.
When she said that the engine was running smoothly, there was a big sigh all around us. Now, she's got new life, and you've got new life. Okay, we've got a new ball game. Let's start over and evaluate what we have to do next.
But I had very strong doubts that this was going to have a successful and safe outcome. I didn't think that it would be possible for her to control the airplane as it got near the ground.
A Coast Guard search and rescue helicopter was dispatched to the area.
Changeover. We have an aircraft already launched to assist you. I'd like him to come aboard. I know what you mean. How is your husband doing? He's out. Okay. Is there anyone else on board the aircraft? Yes, I have a friend with me who knows less than I do. 8330 Golf. You don't have a problem concerning fuel now. You should have about another 3 hours flying time at least, and we'll get you down before then. Okay. Just hope I have that much time in me.
The aircraft was on autopilot, so it was pretty much flying itself at that point. But it was traveling at 120 miles an hour. And of course, the more time elapses, the farther away it's going to be, and we'll lose it off our radar scopes.
Wayne would have to teach Elaine how to turn the plane safely.
Now, this is Edwin. We're watching you on radar. We have you on radar. Can you tell me what your heading is? Right above the control column, there should be an instrument, a round instrument with an airplane in the middle of it. It tells degrees of the compass. Can you tell me what that's reading? Read off the top of it. The one that's under the attitude is 13. Okay, on the lower right-hand corner of that particular instrument, there's a little round knob, and with that, you can turn that autopilot bug. Try turning that to the right until you're on 18 and see what happens. That looks like you've made a turn to the west real fine. Real good. Can you tell us what the fuel gauge reads? Is it the right tank? That indicator seems to be dropping so fast. It's down like to 2 now.
Our time is limited. We needed to get her on the ground before she runs out of fuel.
If I could have looked out the window, I could have probably talked her to a safe landing. But I couldn't do that. We couldn't physically see the aircraft. So my thought was to get another airplane near her, close to her, that could see her and that she could see.
Authorities traced the plane's call numbers and found it was leased to a flight school managed by the victim's friend, Ken Winters.
Ken?
Yeah?
It's a tower chief. He needs to talk to you.
Okay, put it on 133. Excuse me just a minute, I'll be right back. I wasn't really too concerned about it because the tower chief calls me all the time when one of our students is either flying through somebody's airspace that they're not supposed to be or doesn't understand how to enter the traffic pattern. I was in shock. I had known Richard for about 5 years, and I taught him how to fly, and we became fairly close. He was almost like a father to me. The only thing that I could try to do was to try to find them and try to talk them down.
He's much faster than she is, so that'll be good. He'll be able to catch it.
Once we found out that he was on the way, we were trying to decide where she could land this airplane now.
The controllers agreed the best place was a nearby airline training strip located in an unpopulated area of the Everglades.
She has plenty of space out there to get the airplane down. And if it should not be successful. No one else gets injured.
Okay, Mrs. Yedlin, we're going to aim you right straight for an airport. If you can take your heading bug again and move it back to the S, to the south, that should take us just in the right direction. And 467, the altitude readout is at 5,000 right now. He's at 5,000? That's affirmative. Okay, we're descending.
I wanted to get to the airplane as quickly as I possibly could. I had no way of knowing whether Richard was alive or not. The whole time I was flying out there, I still really couldn't believe that this was happening.
Mrs. Yedlin, we turned just a little bit too far to the left. Take the heading bug and move it about 30 degrees to the right, if you would, please. 467, presently in your 12 o'clock position there, about a mile. And go ahead and talk to her. Okay, Elaine, this is Ken. How you doing? Not too well. It looks very bad. Just hang in there. We're going to help you. No problem.
I knew that I'm going to have to be a little bit stronger than her at this point and help her get through this.
Okay, we're going to come up behind you. Sure. Ken, she is just off to your left now. Yes, I see you.
Once Ken arrived on the scene, we became spectators at that point.
And it's now the reality of we've done everything we can do. Is she going to live or die?
We were at 5,000 feet when I caught up with her, and we had to descend to sea level. The biggest fear that I had was that something would go wrong. How am I going to feel about watching her fly this airplane into a tragic conclusion?
We're going to set up a descent, Elaine. I'm going to want you to push the mixture to rich. I want you to pull the throttle back to the 2,000 on the RPM and fly west. I want you to trim the nose down just a little bit using the trim wheel. Roll it forward a little bit. Is your altimeter showing that you're descending? About 200 feet. 200 feet per minute? Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
I stayed right on her wing so that she could look over and she could see the attitude that I was at.
Okay, looks like you have the nose pitched up. Don't make big corrections. Make just small corrections, okay? Yeah.
The autopilot was just holding her wings level, but it really wasn't controlling her descent at all. She had to do that.
Okay, Elaine, if you look off to your right, you see the airplane that we're going to land at. Do you see it off there to the right? Yes, I see it. I want you to go ahead. It's right off your right wing. I want you to go ahead and do whatever you have to with the heading bug so that the airplane points at that runway. Okay.
This was the most crucial part now. The hardest skill to learn or to teach anybody in flying is really the landing. And it's the one skill that you spend the most amount of time on teaching people to do until they get it right.
But Elaine would only have one chance.
Now, here's how we're going to make this approach. As we get in closer, I'm going to ask you to reduce your power. I still want you to continue your descent right now, though. I want you to continue your descent until we get down to 1,000 feet, okay? And then I'll tell you what to do with the power. Okay.
The thing I was most concerned about is I did not want her to get too slow. My philosophy here was, if she's going fast, she'll use all of the 10,000 feet of this runway, but if she got the airplane too slow and stalled, she'd be finished flying.
Hey, you got to turn a little bit more to the right to get lined up with that runway. Hey, you're doing great. We're going to try to keep off your wing. You should be at 2,000 feet now, is that correct?
As Elaine descended, the Miami controllers lost radio contact with her.
When we could hear Ken, but not hear Elaine, that's when the reality of the situation really hit home. There's nothing you can do. You just have to wait and wait and hope that you hear the word that she landed safely.
Ken, this is the Coast Guard helicopter. So we're standing by just north of Dade Collier for you. We've got medical assistance coming out by Falcon Jet to assist, and we're also standing back to a medevac when you're ready. Okay, very good. Elaine, how you doing, kid? You should be about...
We're getting closer to the runway now. I mean, we're really zeroing in on it.
Elaine only had Ken and herself to depend on as she switched off the autopilot to try to make the landing.
It was coming down to the end. I just kept hoping at that point that she was going to be able to put the airplane someplace on the runway.
As soon as we knew she made it, then we screamed out to everybody. We were tired, but we were elated.
The propeller was dented and the front landing gear was broken, but Elaine had managed to make a safe landing. Her husband Richard was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing that could be done. He had died of a massive heart attack.
It had been misty when we left, and the weather cleared, and my husband said, "What a beautiful day." And I kidded him. I said, "Whenever you're flying, it's a beautiful day." And after he died, I could only say how wonderful you went out on top. You went out exactly as you would have liked. Like him to have done it 10 years later, but for the moment, it was just perfect for him.
It has been 7 years since that day. Elaine has remarried, and she and her husband have built a new life together.
There's no time to just plain give up. You know, life keeps pulling at you. It pulled at me in the plane, and you have to go on to the next thing. You go on, and if you're as lucky as I've been, you go on to a very good life.
Passenger Mitzi Doris and Elaine are still good friends, but the memories of that flight still haunt Mitzi.
I was just absolutely frozen. I thought it was either going to be water or alligators or fire or something of that kind. I'm here today because of Elaine. Very grateful to her.
The plane landing changed me so tremendously that I'm surprised that old friends recognize me. I have this degree of confidence now that I never did. I'm forever grateful to the controllers for the way they immediately took control of me. And to Ken, I was the hands, but he was the one who told them what to do.
She was a pretty amazing woman to be able to control panic and fear and be able to still get the airplane on the ground safely.
I didn't think at the time that her life was in my hands. I just realized that I had the knowledge that she needed. I've often thought, if all the money I spent for flight training and flight hours and so forth, if all that was meant for that 1 hour, it was worth it. Really worth it.